On today's episode of the show, we rank the top three most important football games for the Louisville Cardinals this fall, explaining what the deciding factors are, how context matters, and more. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making this your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. On this episode of the show, we rank the top three most important football games this fall for the Louisville Cardinals, explaining how context matters, looking into the conference/playoff implications, and more. So without further ado, let's get into number three. I do hope that you all had a great Independence Day. I know at this point, Kentucky Pollen is putting up Lamar Jackson 2016 video game numbers up against my allergies and sinuses, hence the abundance of bags under my eyes. So if I sound a little hoarse today or if I start coughing, don't pay any attention to it. I'm down 3-1 in the allergy NBA finals at the moment. So enough with the puns, enough with the sports comparisons. Let's discuss number three. This one is probably going to be a little bit more controversial due to the placement on the list. I think most would agree that it should be on the list somewhere, but I have it at number three. That is the regular season finale on the road, November 30th at Kentucky. Now, some will say this game should be higher. It should be number one. It should be number two at the very least. Why is this game at number three for you? I would argue with anyone that this game should be on the list. If you're telling me that it's not, then maybe the only other acceptable answer that I would have would be a top ACC school coming to town or on the road for that matter. I don't want to really reveal the particular school that I'm talking about, but that would be the only exception for me. If you have Kentucky higher on this list, I'm not really going to disagree because the placement and difference between number one and number three, it's fairly small. Like there's not a ton of differentiating factors here, but the reason why this game should be on the list, well, truthfully, there are three of them. Number one, it starts out with the rivalry. The Cardinals have not won this game since 2017. Kentucky has owned this rivalry. 2018 was a blowout. 2019 was a blowout. The teams didn't play in 2020. 2021 was an embarrassment at Cardinal Stadium. 22 was closer, but nonetheless still a loss. In 2023, Louisville entered the game as the favorite and got upset at home. So this rivalry needs to turn in Louisville's favor. Like this has to be one of the more important games of the season due to that fact alone. And pushing it a little further, I think that it spans beyond just the rivalry here. Like you look at the conferences, and one of the major talking points when Louisville lost to Kentucky last season was, well, this is supposed to be a top two team in the ACC. They clinched their berth for their first ever ACC championship game last week against Miami, and then they lose to a middle-of-the-road SEC team at best. And Kentucky projects to probably be in the same boat this season. That team is going to be a little bit hard to predict what's going to happen because they do have a new quarterback who is inexperienced, or they have a couple of quarterbacks they can choose from. They don't have a ton of experience, and every team is different, year in, year out. So we'll see what Kentucky brings to the table. But they have a they have a pretty tough schedule. I say all that to once again acknowledge that they are going to likely be a middle-of-the-road team at best. And that's no disrespect to them. It's more so an indication of how good the SEC is going to be. But I think that this could be somewhat of a down year for Kentucky. And if you have another successful season, but you lose that game against Kentucky, then it sort of takes the significance away. Now, I know that it doesn't take away the significance of the wins in themselves, but looking at the whole body of work, if you were to win 10 games in the regular season again and you lose to Kentucky, then you're continually fueling that narrative. And it could ultimately, if you win 10 games, it could hurt your chances at making the playoffs, because even with 12 teams, you know that the stock for SEC teams and Big Ten teams are going to be a lot higher than ACC teams, even if those SEC teams only have about 9 wins and maybe you have 10 to 11, because they are looking for any way that they can keep ACC, and I guess it's the Pac-12. I'm not even sure what that conference is called now. I guess it's still the Pac-12. You see where I'm getting at with this, though. You can't give the College Football Playoff Committee any ammunition to use against you. And losing to a Kentucky team that very well could be like 7-4 heading into this game, or maybe even 6-5, because of that schedule being fairly challenging, who knows? Losing this game would hurt the conference image. And I think that that's the only game on this list that would do that. But nonetheless, that would happen. That's why, in my opinion, it is definitely a top 3 most important game on the schedule. The third reason as to why it lands on this list is because it is the last regular season game that the playoff committee or any bowl committee will have a chance to watch you play in. One of the reasons why Louisville lost so much steam in between the end of the season and the offseason is because they stumbled down the stretch. Louisville ended the season on a 3-game losing streak. And it wasn't like they played really well and just lost games. No, they didn't play well in any of the 3 games against Kentucky, Florida State, or USC. And then the narrative arises, well, that they played better teams, so they didn't look as good because they couldn't hide behind the lack of toughness on the schedule. So this season's all about proving the country, proving the media, proving the national landscape, proving the college football playoff wrong. I told you the 3 reasons why this game in particular should be on the list. Again, if you have it a little higher up the list, I'm not going to disagree with you. Well, I am going to disagree with you, but I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. Like, this is all opinion-based. And despite Kentucky being top 3 on this list, I think that context matters. I think that the conference and playoff implications hold a little bit more weight in this particular hypothetical. I understand that the game that you might want to win the most might not necessarily be the most important on the list. Like, Kentucky is the game that I want to win the most. Like, it is embarrassing to have not won in this rivalry since 2017. Since Lamar Jackson was last on campus, he's been in the NFL for over 6 seasons. He's won the MVP twice, and Louisville still hasn't won this game. So don't take this ranking at number 3 as me not acknowledging the significance of this rivalry game, because truthfully, there is no other game on this schedule in the regular season that I want to win more than Kentucky. But when you put them up against each other, there are valid reasons as to why number 2 and number 1 aren't the Kentucky game. It goes to conference implications. It goes to playoff implications. I will say that they are going to be tougher tests, likely better teams that Louisville will play. I won't get too much into it, but number 2 on the list is perhaps the best chance to make a statement on the national landscape. And we'll identify who the opponent is in the second-ranked matchup after we tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your motor every time or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Heading into the second segment of this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Appreciate you all for making the show your first listen every day. Just a reminder, the show is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Do want to give a small update before I identify the number 2 most important matchup. I know that I have been pretty vocal that July is an off-season month, just like June was for this show. There has been a minor tweak. It will be sort of a hybrid off-season role. There won't be as many episodes at the beginning of the month, but we are going to ramp it up a little bit heading into August, which is the first official, I'm trying to do the bunny ears, on-season show in quotation marks. But nonetheless, just wanted to let you all know that there won't be the full 19 episodes a month that we usually are accustomed to, but there will be more than 12. So it'll probably be closer to 19 than 12. Just wanted to give a little bit of a heads up. As always, if you have any content ideas or suggestions, I know we have some fun planned series, coming up here shortly. But if you have any content suggestions or things that you would like to see discussed, be sure to drop them in the YouTube comments below. Nonetheless, enough rambling. Number 2 on the list of the top 3 most important football games of the season for the Louisville Cardinals is a September 28th matchup on the road up in South Bend against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It's 3:30 kickoff time on Peacock, which don't even get me started that it's not even on national television networks, but nonetheless, it's sort of the way sports streaming is these days. But Notre Dame very well might be the toughest team that Louisville will have to play this season, at least according to a lot of the preseason polls. Right now, a lot of publications have Notre Dame anywhere inside of the top 10, top 12. Athlon Sports has them at number 9. They will be replacing Sam Hartman, which a lot of Louisville fans and Louisville's players don't want to hear because of how much success that the Cardinals have had against Hartman when he was both at Notre Dame and at Wake Forest, when he had that third quarter in 2022, where there were so many turnovers. But nonetheless, I'm not here to reminisce on the past. If it makes you feel any better, though, they do face a quarterback that they had a ton of success against in Riley Leonard. Transfer from Duke. Granted, he dealt with an ankle injury, but Louisville made that Duke offense one-dimensional, and the Blue Devils did not score a single point in a shutout victory at Cardinal Stadium. It was a rain game, so you have to take context into consideration, but they will go up against Riley Leonard, a decorated college quarterback, and likely at that point fully healthy. They do bring in Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell. Bo Collins, a pretty solid transfer from Clemson. Chris Mitchell is, I think, actually, he's still with Notre Dame. They will bring back Chris Mitchell, I should say. Bo Collins is the one that transfers in. So it'll be pretty interesting. However, I think that there's a reason why this game is number 2 and not, getting surpassed by Kentucky, but also not rising up to dethrone the number 1 matchup. Let's look at why the Notre Dame matchup is where it is right now. Well, arguably, it is the matchup that gives you the opportunity to put the nation on full watch. It is, the fourth game of the season for the Cardinals. So it'll be the first true road game. Well, actually, the first road game in general. And you just get the opportunity to turn heads across the country, to do what you did last year and say, hey, look, I'm for real. Like when Louisville started out 5-0, I think most of the country were kind of looking at this thinking, Jeff Brohm's doing what we thought he would do, but this is going to be a different animal that Louisville's going up against. Notre Dame is a lot better than the teams that they played. And boom, the Cardinals handled the Irish at Cardinal Stadium. The narrative starts to change for the Cardinals. Now, unfortunately, that narrative didn't last too long when they lost at Pittsburgh the following week. But week prior, the conversation was completely different. What I've seen in college football that doesn't really get talked about a ton, the narratives surrounding teams help out so very much when it comes to the end of the year, when it comes to the college football playoff committee, where teams get talked about so much early on in the year. They get so much hype that even if they struggle a little bit down the road, some of that hype might last a little bit longer, and the image of that team doesn't go down. So if you can get a win on the road up at Notre Dame and do what you did in 2014, go up to South Bend up the road and defeat the Irish, then I think that the focus around your team nationally starts to change for the better. Arguably, they are on this list because at this point, preseason-wise, it is able to be inferred that they will be the highest-ranked opponent to start the season for the Cardinals. So right then and there, you have a true road game. It's your first road game with these new players. You're going up against arguably the toughest team that you will play all season. You'll play in a different environment than Cardinal Stadium because it won't be a home game. And it's against Notre Dame of all teams. Like, this is no disrespect to any team. That's why I'm not going to really identify another team. But if you were to play a team, like an out-of-conference team that's like doesn't have the hype of Notre Dame, they don't have the name recognition. Let's say it's like a Big Ten team that's not Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan, but they're still ranked in the top 10 somehow. Well, I guess in this point, it's not like Oregon or Washington. Let's just say it's a random team. Chances of that matchup being considered to be more important than a Notre Dame matchup, very, very slim, right? So this definitely matters. And then you look into the playoff implications. A win on the road against Notre Dame could definitely help because there's going to be 12 teams. So it's going to be interesting because you really can't predict just how this conversation is going to go. But what I will probably be able to confirm that you all likely already know is that they're going to do anything that they can to keep the ACC teams out of this playoff. And maybe it's not personal to the ACC. Maybe it's more so an indication to the love they have for the SEC and the Big Ten. But you best believe that Louisville's going to be sweating if they're sort of at the end of the conversation. They have 10 wins, and there's an SEC school that's starting to get talked about with 9 wins. That's a tough situation. But if you get the win against Notre Dame, you boost your resume, number one. You get the win over Notre Dame head-to-head, so it can be predicted that the Fighting Irish and Marcus Freeman will be right there in the playoff conversation. Let's say they're at the back end of the top 10 or they're in the top 15, and you have that head-to-head win over Notre Dame at their place. That is such a key asset to have in the results column for Louisville because it's really hard to justify if the resumes are similar between Louisville and Notre Dame and you have that win over Notre Dame. Or let's just say it's not Notre Dame and you're up to head-to-head with a different team, but you have that marquee win. It can definitely work in your favor. So that's why it's number 2 for me, is because of the implications of a win. Like if you beat Notre Dame, you sort of get more benefits than if you were to beat Kentucky, unless Kentucky is the top 15 team at that time. You beat them on the road in the final game of the season, but I don't really expect them to be that good. That good meaning top 15 good. I still think that they're going to be better than what people think they're going to be, so we'll just have to see. But number one, it's a conference matchup, obviously. And for me, the difference between 1 to 2 is larger than the difference between 2 to 3. It's the clear-cut number one most important game on the schedule for the Cardinals. And we'll tell you who that matchup is with after we tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of some of the best sporting leagues across the country. One of them being Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. For those who know me personally, I am a huge, unapologetic Houston Astros fan. And we play up in Cincinnati on Labor Day weekend. I've already got my tickets. I went to Gametime, and the experience was phenomenal. You download the app, and you get instant views from your seat, so you know what you're getting into. The last-minute deals will allow you to get overall the greatest deals out there. There's all-in prices, so I wasn't really bombarded by the final fees, if you will, the final taxes at the end. I knew what I was getting into. And you can also get a panoramic view from your seat. It's not just you see where your seats are, you get a panoramic view. I'm rambling, but nonetheless, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And on the final segment of this hybrid offseason Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we are ranking the top 3 most important football games for Jeff Brohm's team this fall season, just about 2 months away, just under 2 months. But back to the hypothetical, and then there was one. The number one matchup this season for the Cardinals is going to be something in which Louisville is going to try to do something that they've never done this season, or since they joined the ACC, let me clarify. That is defeating the Clemson Tigers. Louisville will go on the road to South Carolina on November 2nd, Saturday, November 2nd, to play Clemson. They've never defeated the Tigers since joining the ACC, despite being just outside of getting in the win column. 2014, they were right there. They couldn't get the job done. 2015, they had an opportunity. 2016, my gosh, don't even get me started with that game. Moving all along, they got dominated by Clemson up until about 2020. Was that 2021 that they played Clemson? I think it was 21. It might have been 22. No, I think it was 22. The years run together for me. Let me just put it that way. The year where DJ Uiagalelei struggled against Louisville, Malik Cunningham, and the Cardinals were rolling. He goes down with injury. Clemson comes back. Louisville has first and goal on about the 4-yard line. They don't score. Clemson wins the game. I say all that to, again, highlight that Louisville has never defeated the Clemson Tigers in football since joining the ACC 10 seasons ago. They will look to do that for the first time this year in the team's most important game of the season. Number one, it's on the road against a conference opponent. That automatically gives it a little bit more weight. Clemson, like Notre Dame, is likely going to be ranked fairly high. They have been rumored anywhere from inside of the, I would say, top 15 is probably fairly reasonable, but you're going to have, an opportunity here for, Louisville to go into Clemson, and Clemson's going to be pretty good, potentially top 10. It's going to be sort of towards the end of the season, so you're going to have an opportunity to play Clemson with a ton of conference implications on the line. And I think that for that reason, it is the number one matchup on the schedule. Clemson hasn't made the college football playoff in 4 seasons. They didn't have that great of a year. They went 500 in conference play, but they bring back a good team. They bring back a lot of young players that played a ton of snaps this past season. Now, it's famously been noted that Clemson doesn't like to utilize the transfer portal, but Dabo Swinney believes that that could be still an avenue for success by just having natural development. Clemson being a top 15, likely top 15 team or top 25, this game having conference implications because Louisville doesn't play North Carolina. They don't play Florida State, but let me go ahead and remind you that the top 2 teams in the conference, win percentage-wise in conference play, will make the ACC championship game in Charlotte. You do get to escape Florida State and Florida State and North Carolina, but you play Miami. You don't play NC State, but there's a handful of teams that you feel could be in the mix here. Like North Carolina, I feel like it's going to be pretty decent. Florida State's going to be good. Clemson's probably going to be better than they were last year. So not only do you have to handle business, now that's kind of why Miami was on the outside looking in because of the conference implications, but if you can defeat a team like Clemson, it's huge for trying to get back to the conference championship game. That's the number one thing here. It boosts your resume, a road win against Clemson, who, let's say Clemson is as good as advertised, and they get into the conversation for the college football playoff. Sort of the same trend with Notre Dame. If you defeat Clemson, well, if you put their resumes up head-to-head and they're similar, then that head-to-head victory is going to be one of the major deciding factors. If you take another team that has a similar resume, you put them up head-to-head, and that Clemson win could be what gets Louisville over the hump. It's all about trying to position yourself to have the best resume possible that you can present to the playoff committee and say, here, look, I dare you to leave me out of the college football playoff. So it's sort of similar to Notre Dame. Now, the name recognition for this matchup isn't as great as Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame's name just kind of historically holds more weight. Maybe if this is like 2018-19, that it'd be a little bit different, but it's not. It's 2024. You throw the conference implications into this, and I think that that is the deciding factor here. That's what makes this Clemson game the number one game, the number one most important performance for the Louisville Cardinals this fall. I want to hear from you all. Drop in the comments below. Rank your top 3. You don't even have to really, propose a justification for them. Just rank your top 3. I'm interested to see where my opinions rank up with yours. I will tell you, there probably won't be an episode until Sunday. We'll have a Sunday episode where we'll discuss a little bit on the basketball side. There's some recruiting stuff to talk about. We will start to do more football previews. We've got some previews upcoming. I don't know whether I'm going to hold them until August or introduce them late July. We're going to break the schedule down into 3 segments and do what we did last year. Take the 4-game pockets of the schedule, break down the opponents, and predict the record. We will rank the top 15 players on the team, 15-1 like we did last season. And we will also do positional outlook previews for every single position. That will be a 10-part series. So as many shows as we will have, there's not really a huge opportunity for, more content ideas because of how much this is going to take up. But nonetheless, if you have any content that you would like to be discussed, be sure to drop it in the YouTube section below. That is going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Have a great end to your week and have a great start to the weekend here in the first weekend of July. We'll see you right back here in a couple days.